last time they did it.
It shouldn't be. I don't know why something happened with the account because it was never like that before. Click three buttons, it's working fine. All right, 5 o'clock. Let's begin. Council Budget Workshop number 6. Sue.
That's good morning once.
Nope, that's the screen on the side. You're good.
Okay. Oh, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. This is the number 6 of our budget work session, and today the changes are in blue now in the memo. So you're now sitting there looking at a 15.193% tax rate. And if you go on to not the second page, there are no changes on the third page. I did reduce the general levy by $40,000 to use fund balance as directed at the last work session. And then you asked for an analysis on snow plowing. So I did it from 2013 to 2024. So you can see here that the average over that time span was 70,199, although it seemed, however, it seems that the items highlighted in yellow are $80,000 to $100,000. And we did notice that the years where snow plowing was down, that sanding and salting costs were increased many times. And that could be a condition of the weather, like melting, refreezing, or freezing rain, that you wouldn't have the snow, but you would have the ice events that would happen. In 2020, the former budgets were increased for the increased roads taken on from the development. So it went from an $80,000 budget to $120,000 budget. I did not put an inflation factor on any of these numbers. So these are the actual dollars from 2013 to 2024. Staff does recommend a budget of 100,000, which would decrease the budget you currently have by 20,000. Then if you go to the next page, the only change I did again was I removed 40,000 in general fund levy as requested. And then after reducing the levy with the use of fund balance of 40,000, the fund balance is projected to be about 50.5% of the next year's estimated expenditures using the 2026 budget and adding a 2% inflation. So this would be in line with your fund balance policy for cash flow reserves, and a reduction of 1.2% from your previous version. Then the levy impact, it's now 4.3%. The tax rate decreased 0.6%. The impact on 88% of your residential homes in Credit River is now 4.8% or lower. And that's, or to put it in terms of dollars, it's $60 or less. The actual change in the levy is giving about a 4% reduction to the increase that resulted on everybody for their market value and fiscal disparities. The reduction in our budget will actually give a 4% reduction on that 8.1% that you see. And then the other thing that we have outstanding is a decision about the fire truck payment, because we need to give Prior Lake an answer on this. So
Thought we
with
gave
that,
direction on that last time.
I had written down that council still didn't know for sure. You talked about it, but that you hadn't fully decided yet.
I thought there was the majority of us were asking to do that.
Okay.
Well,
We didn't vote on
we
it.
have to vote on it.
Well, yeah, we didn't vote on it, but I think that was the direction that council was trending towards.
Yeah, I mean, we can't vote on it, but we can.
Right.
Why would we
Survey.
pay $350,000 in advance? I can't, I gotta get Pratt batteries. To save $1,000 a year on interest?
That's $15,000 over 15 years.
Yeah, I think the numbers you had is actually close to $20,000.
Oh, it's close to, yes, with bonding costs and that, it would save about $20,000.
So while we're waiting on that, the plowing, you said it's going down to 100. Looks like it's still 115 on this, is that true?
Yeah, you didn't
Okay.
direct me to change it,
Okay.
but okay, I was thinking of 120. Sorry, I
Well, I have,
apologize.
I so, oh no, I'm sorry,
got it.
never mind. No, I apologize, 120, I was looking at,
Yeah. You talked about 115 and then you decided that you wanted to see a trend before you made a decision.
It's gonna snow tonight.
Might. It's true, it might snow tonight. Yeah, I mean, oh, no. Would you catch on the,
I've done that 3 times.
on the,
Yeah, edge.
for the markers there? If,
I missed everything that was said. Sue, can you explain again what you were saying when I was your patents?
If by paying the $350,000 up front, you're going to save about $20,000 over the 15 years.
Right,
Savings.
right. Save
Will save the city $20,000.
on a present value basis?
I didn't do a 20 on a present value basis.
Wouldn't you want to do it on a present value basis? Because paying upfront $350,000 is save $20,000 over 15 years. It's a no-brainer that on a present value basis, we're better off paying paying it over time. Secondly, as I said last time, current residents don't want to pay upfront for something they may not use 10, 15 years from now. That's why we try and spread it out, so people that come into the city, they're paying for it, they're not getting a freebie when they move in. Because we've already paid it, the current residents, so. I think it's wrong to do, to prepay.
So everything that I've paid for, Bill, you've used. So I don't get this future and
Well, first of all,
now and whatever, but you know, we have to do it, let's do it. We try to plan
we are
15,
planning,
20 years ahead here, our goal, so.
what's the bond payments, what's the annual number that the residents would pay on an annual basis? If we just had, we didn't prepay.
I figured that out last time. I don't have it right off the top of
Is
my
it
head.
about 30,000, 31,000 roughly? At a 4% bond premium or bond coupon rate?
I put that in,
Yeah.
was it?
It's
Yeah.
about that, okay. I'd rather pay 30,000 over 15 years than pay 350,000 upfront. It's just. There's no reason, and Leroy, I can't explain why, if we prepaid things before, I was on the city council then to question that, but. To me, it's like, there's no reason for us to pay it in advance. There's no reason.
other than it saved us $20,000, so.
No, not on a present value basis. You have to
And I
bring up
think,
that
again,
money.
Bill, I think this was something we kind of gave staff direction at the last workshop. We're going back over stuff. that
No,
we did
no, we
last
did
time.
not decide. We did not decide,
I
Chris.
think there was 4 of us that were agreeing that that was the direction we wanted to go, and. Well, we aren't making a final direction here didn't then and didn't tonight, but I thought that was the consensus amongst the group was that was the direction we would ask staff to present, and. So I don't know that we need to have that discussion anymore. The only next time we need that discussion is probably to make a decision to actually execute that.
Is anyone familiar with the concept of the value of money, present value of money? If you run the net present value on it, it is not advantageous to our residents to prepay something $350,000.
The only problem though, Bill, is what happens is we have additional needs. Now you're saddling them with something that's, you're having this big fluctuation, and I think that those that are. Living a little more paycheck to paycheck will struggle with.
Right, and so I calculated that, so the bond payment's $31,000 a year. That's what our levy would go up, $31,000 a year when they pay for or they get the bond, okay? That's our allocation. That's $16 a year per 1,927 residents. It's not a big number. Okay,
Of course, on the other side,
If
if
we
I-
don't continue on, we're losing our.
it's $16. It's,
I agree with the present value, but I think there's more to it than that. Or you will have, if we continue to replenish our capital, we will be making interest on that. And then you will have the big influx.
actually, don't we lose interest? Don't we lose interest if we pay 350,000 up front?
We lost it because we had it in advance. So we've been making interest on this $350,000 for, I don't know how many years.
And why wouldn't we want to continue making money on that 350,000?
Well, because we had to do it. Someone, Leroy back 15 years ago started funding that.
We
so
didn't
now-
fund, we didn't fund it. When did we start funding a fire truck?
Probably 10 years ago, and
No.
I don't think we've been
No,
delivered,
we
we
have, this
haven't
is a new
delivered.
truck.
we had.
The capital.
It's a capital expense, but we haven't
We
delivered.
funded a
that funding.
tanker, we've.
Yeah, over the years,
yeah.
yes, we have over the years.
So we're
Yes.
gonna be buying
Definitely.
another tanker also.
Yeah.
That's coming up. And this isn't gonna be the only fire truck that we wind up buying in the next 20 years. There's gonna be several more. There's gonna be a couple of pumpers that actually have to probably be replaced. There's gonna be more money that we have to spend. So I kind of look at it, I do look at it as we've got the money to pay for it. We should do that. Let's save the 20 grand in interest and start thinking about saving money for the next purchases, because there are gonna be other ones. It's not like we can't, so why would we saddle everybody with a past fire truck that we already bought, that we're now just paying for, when we're actually gonna have other trucks that we have to buy and other expenses that we have to have with them? It just doesn't, to me, it makes sense if you've got the money, if we have the money to pay for it, then the responsible thing is to actually pay for it and get it out of the way and close that debt out. Because there's other stuff, and every one of them is gonna be looked at as a tax increase. And some of the other ones, maybe we can finance them. But I think this one, because we're able to do it, I think we ought to really do that, save the 20 grand. And then we kind of have a clean slate going forward. It's not something else. It's not 30 grand that we add on to our budget for the next 20 years.
Gee, they bought something in 2021. We didn't prepay for that. That's in our number. That's in our annual number.
Right.
We're changing how we're doing this now. And we had money in our capital account 3 years ago too.
This is a big one.
It is a wrong decision from a present value basis. I'd rather have the city incur $31,000 a year in bond payments over 15 years and pay $350,000 up front. It's a no-brainer.
Mr. Mayor and Council, in the weekly notes on Friday, I did have that the fire department is looking at dissolving the Fire Relief Association. And Councilmember Marker did ask about the state aid that's coming from that. And I did speak with the administrator in Prior Lake about that, and we will have some savings that will come from that. Not the full amount of the 18% that is part of that, because we do have some ESST and we'll have the paid leave, and because they will be part-time city employees. So there is some expense to that. But we are, and the fire association hasn't fully voted on this yet, so it's not final. But they are pretty sure that this will pass and go through. So a couple weeks from now, when it's official, we'll have some numbers on this. But they're anticipating probably $30,000 to $40,000 in savings that will come back to us next year. So we do have some options, that we can put back into capital for a pumper truck, whatever we want to do with that, or levy reduction. That's up to you to decide that. But we do have some options with that too for next year's, and they will adjust our fire contract numbers. But we don't have that now, but we can anticipate probably $30,000 to $40,000 adjustment for next year too, so.
And that would be an expense reduction, it's not related to capital at all, so
Correct.
I'd say we lower our, what we, really, for fire in the general fund, whatever that memo that we got from the fire department in September. I would just lower that by whatever, the 30 or 40 grand.
I think we should wait until it's actually a bird in the hand rather than stone in the bush. On that,
I just
that
heard
can,
him say.
that can help us with the 2027, however it is, or if there is if we get that lowered next year and we have a realized savings, that's great, but we've already kind of figured out how we can now apply excesses in the future budget. We've done that, so I don't see if there's any emergency right now to cut this thing out and give ourselves a pay cut, and we haven't absolutely seen that yet.
All right. You guys good with the recommendation from staff for $100,000 for the snow plowing
Yeah. Yes.
for the expense side?
A little expensive by 20 grand.
Is it 20 or is it 15?
20.
It is 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that'll lower the levy by 20 then?
Well, so that's then the next piece is the last time we talked about using fund balance to lower that number.
That's because this year's we're way under budget. So that has nothing to do with this 20 grand going forward.
If you lower the expense by $20,000, then we will only be using 20,000 of fund balance instead of 40.
No. But I wanna use, okay, we're under budget by 80 grand this year in files, assuming there's no tsunami the next 6 weeks. We said we were gonna use 50% of that fund, that overage or that underage in expense. And now you're saying for 2026, we can lower the 120 to 100, so that's another 20 grand. That why would we have to levy for that 20 grand?
I took it as the council consensus was to use $40,000 in fund balance and then come back with what this was. If we lower this by 20, unless you tell me that you want it lowered by 60,000, you want to use 60,000 fund balance. Lowering the expenses right now would lower, because what I did is I reduced the levy by 40,000. And now if you reduce the expenses by 20,000, you're only using 20,000 in fund balance and not 40.
Okay, so they're not, they're not too, it doesn't make sense to
That
me.
doesn't follow, I don't follow that either.
Okay, your levy is part of your revenues.
Yep.
So I lowered the levy by 40,000.
Right.
When you look at, yes, and I left the expenses alone. So what what you had then is you were using $40,000. You had $40,000 more in expenses than you had in revenue because we were zero before. So now if I lower the expenses by 20,000, now you will be $20,000 more in expenses than revenue. So you'll be using $20,000 in fund balance.
Remain at the same level.
Yeah,
If you would have used the 40.
yeah.
Right, but I think we,
I still lowered, I mean, the levy was lowered 40,000. That would not change. It's just you're only going to be using 20,000 in fund balance and not 40. Because we're lowering the expense, we're lowering the expenses.
I get it.
yeah, I guess why wouldn't we lower another 20?
Right. The 40 is for last year. The 40,000 reduction was for this year, because this year we're not gonna spend 80 grand of what we budgeted, so we're gonna take 40 grand into next year as a reduction to the levy. And now you're saying we should budget 20,000 less for next year. That means we need $20,000 additional net reduction to the levy for next year.
Yeah, that's what I think too. What are we missing?
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, I get it.
I am waiting for the council to direct me because that's just where I'm at.
Hopefully I understand what you're saying.
One thing to be conscious of, I don't know how many of you guys saw this, but City of Jordan went out and got, had Moody's bond rate them recently. They just got the results back, a very favorable bond rating. They posted the, report from Moody's. The last paragraph was factors that could lead to a downgrade. Bullet point number 1 was an available fund balance ratio nearing 50% or a multi-year trend of reserve draws. We used reserves last year to draw
What we
down
used last
levy.
year, Rachel. Because
We
you said
used-
that a couple of times and I don't see it.
We used fund balance last year to lower the levy.
We did.
And now we're talking about-
$179,000.
Yep, and now we're talking about doing it again.
Hundred
So
seventy-nine.
now we're having a regular
Yep.
pattern of using fund balance to reduce the levy.
Wasn't the 179 a transfer?
No,
Mm-mm.
No,
Wasn't the
you
179
use,
one-time things that we budgeted in 2024 that we never spent, but we budgeted for it?
it still reflects as a use of fund balance, and in your audit report, it shows as a use of fund balance also.
But we moved it from general fund to another fund.
It still reduces your general fund, and that's what the bond is looking at.
Well, then why did we move $1 million just last budget?
You're
meeting?
still at 50% right now. What they're talking about is a regular use of. You still have in your capital fund, that's not gonna count against you, the money that you have in your capital fund, that's still, they're still gonna look at that for reserves. When I worked at Arden Hills, we kept our fund balance in general fund about 50%. So at the end of our audit year, we would look at it and we would transfer anything over 50% into our capital fund, and then our capital fund stayed strong. And so we didn't get dinged in our audit. I mean, our bond ratings there, because we were keeping them. But if you're using it to balance and keep your levy down, that's where you're going to.
We talked about using the 40 grand because we over budgeted plowing this year. So we're-
But again,
Moody's can't-
as Sue just said, that's considered fund balance and it would be looked upon as the.
We agreed on that last time, so
We
it
did.
changed,
The expense changed. The expense was reduced by 20,000.
but we're still reducing.
We're reduced
Yeah.
right now, you're reducing
But I'd
20,000.
rather reduce by 20,000, use 20,000 of fund balance than $40,000 of fund balance.
The last time we were just fine.
To get our plowing down to this $100,000 number.
to get the fund, or to get the plowing down to the 20,000 or the 100,000. But now we're actually looking, what we're saying is we're still budgeted at 120. So we're looking at bringing it down to 100
Mm-hmm. And still using
and still using,
$20,000 of fund balance.
correct, to pay for that.
And so it'd be exactly the same as if.
And we
when we
lowered,
were at
then we
last
also.
Last time
lowered
we were at 120
Mhm.
and wanted to use 40,000, so the impact's the same.
But correct me if I'm wrong, weren't we 80 over? Is that what I'm hearing? Is that what I understood before?
Last time your conversation was, should we lower it to 80,000? Should we lower it to 100,000? And then you asked if I could bring you back like a 10-year, so we could
Average.
level it out, yes.
Okay.
But you said, in the meantime,
Let's leave.
lower it.
20.
leave it at 120 and use 40,000 in fund balance. That's what you instructed me. So what I did is I took 40 out of the levy, and then I did this analysis. And after looking at this and how the recent years were more closer to 100,000, that's why I recommended 100,000. But you didn't know at that point if you wanted to be 80 using 40 or if it was 100,000. We were thinking at that point in time, we didn't know for sure what it was going to come out to be. But that's what the conversation was. And then you just decided to take 40,000 out and then let's see what this is, because you didn't know if 80 was too low.
I think we should lower the levy another 20 grand and lower the expense 20 grand.
But she's already taken 40 out.
Right, because we over budgeted plowing expenses this year by 80 grand. And we have that money that I don't think Moody's would have a problem with us taking back some money we budgeted that we didn't use into the next year. Otherwise, how do you ever use an underrun on expense? How do you ever use it?
Typically, what the bonding agencies and the best practices is that usually a lot of fund balance policies are written where at the end of the year, you transfer over that one time, money that you were budgeted into a capital fund and you use it for one-time purposes so that you're consistently having your operating budget and your fluctuations really are, you increase.
It stays stable, which is
Yes.
then we're not going up and down
Correct.
for taxpayers.
And
which
that-
makes it
and-
easier for them to do their own budget.
Yes, and it's easier to explain and the bonding agencies understand that too, and that is best practice.
The problem I have with that though is that we're telling our residents, we're levying for one thing. We're levying for plowing services, but we didn't spend it all, so now we're going to use that money next year for something we didn't tell you what we're gonna use it for. I don't like that. But I understand what you're saying, okay?
No, I
But
understand. I'm not,
okay.
I'm just giving you my professional opinion and being on the national boards and having been a budget reviewer and sitting through reading calls and working with GASB and working with consultants. This is the best practice in the industry. So I'm just relaying how it's looked at.
Is it best practice or is that just how it's done?
No, it's best practice.
So if we put $100 in the budget and we end up using 60 again this year. Can you tell me again what we would do that 40?
What we can do, if you want, you could take the 40 and transfer it to capital to save for other things, to reduce anything you'd have to borrow for or one-time things you have to pay for in the future. Or we can do a budget adjustment next year if we think it's going to come in higher. Like say this year, say something happens in 2026 where we all of a sudden in January, February, we blow the $100,000 of snow events. And if you need it, you can do a budget adjustment and put it into that column. And so that you have that extra money there to pay for snow plowing. And you can change the budget, you can adjust the budget, like you could keep it at 100 and then after we do the budget next year, we can do a budget adjustment for whatever you didn't spend, we adjust that line item. So maybe it's 150,000. I mean, you could keep adjusting it every year if you want, or you can transfer it over to the capital fund for one-time expenditures.
So if we budgeted $60,000 and then made a budget adjustment to $100,000 in the beginning of the year, that is not looked at as using our general fund.
No,
Or capital fund for that.
no, if you do a budget, no. That's not looked at as using fund balance.
So you think we should lower it even more?
It just,
Or
I do tend to agree with Bill on this one where, okay, so we budget here and I get it. We gotta budget something and sometimes it's higher and sometimes it's lower. But when it's lower, then we're putting it into something else that. It's, to my mind, it comes a slush fund then that we use for something else. And I'd rather put it back into the budget line that it's supposed to be for, so we're actually paying for it. So if we go down to 60, then we make a budget adjustment next year for the 40 that we're using, then we're not being, our bond rating isn't going to get affected by it.
The only problem you come with that is, say you do 60, and then next year you do a budget adjustment to 100, and then next year you use the 100. So the next year after that, you are going to budget for 100, and that's going to be a $40,000 swing in your tax rate. And then that's one line item, but some people may tend to say, well, yeah, we have that money here, but let's cut something else out to make up for it so that we're not swinging that $60,000. So you can end up playing that game with a lot of line items, which is generally why we suggest, you can do that and then keep carrying it over every year if you want to do a budget adjustment, which I have done when I was at Red Wing. We would do that a lot. And in a lot of other cities, we would move that money over to the capital budget because it was one-time funds. So when we had to have matching dollars or we had to go out and do bonding, we would buy that down because those bonds end up on the property tax also. So we would use it for one-time things that wouldn't impact year over year increases on your operating budget. I mean, it's all, you can look at it different ways. But it's sort of like if you were at home and you did your budget and then this year you didn't have to replace the tires or you didn't have to go and, do something that you had planned on. You'd probably put that money in your savings account, or you'd have that money put away and you'd probably do a different improvement, if it came up. And so that's sort of what we're looking at it city-wise, and we're doing it from a standpoint of looking at the city's needs and trying to save up and build reserves to pay for those things.
So is there a difference between using 20 and 40 from an auditor perspective?
You mean in the fund balance?
Yes.
No, I don't think there's much of a difference between that. You might want to, what you want to be cognizant of is, do you want to, the more fund balance you use from this year to next year, know that you're going to increase those line items, or you end up, because it was low one year, then it goes back up again, to increase. And now do you start we can cut someplace else. And then like every year you're doing it in a different spot, instead of being consistent. That's why I tend to say, when at the end of the year, if you have a fund balance that states that you want to be at 50% when you get done with your audit and you know what all your actuals are, I always recommended that you transfer that money into your capital fund where it's one-time money, because you don't end up in those. It's really hard to explain to the taxpayers. It's really hard to explain when you're trying to budget year over year. When you've done those, it's just easier if it's another fund and you know that that's what it is. It doesn't mean that you can't take money and do a transfer from that fund into there some year to balance your budget if you wanted to. Like you had the comp plan this year. Chances are we have that in that capital fund. So when we spend it, it's probably going to get reclassed to general fund. We'll probably ask you to do a transfer from the capital fund to the general fund then when we do the reporting. So that's not using fund balance. That's using one-time money for one-time things. It's just easier to explain. So I'm just trying to give you, and that's why I used to recommend that, because it seemed like in some of my other councils, we would go down the rabbit hole and we tried to keep everything in the general fund, and we were doing that. It was harder to know what was one-time revenue and to keep our even budget, because we were always reducing things. If you take that out of there, you're not doing that every year and you're not having to explain ups and downs all the time. It's more of an easier way to explain it and for the tax base to pay for it over time.
That's tried to get away from about 10 years ago, trying to keep this thing even instead of this.
Well, it'd be like,
down that we were doing.
it would be like somebody having a paycheck where you're a contracted person. Maybe one year you make this and next year you make 10% more. The year after you make 13% less, up and down. You don't have a steady, so it's really hard to budget what your expenses are. That's kind of what I look at as your tax levy. It's kind of like your paycheck, if you want to compare it to like your personal or a house. There's no right or wrong way. Budgeting is an art.
Sure.
It's explaining it and trying to make it simple enough.
Like you said, a consistent way.
But I don't like using just reserves to reduce tax levy. Because then we did it last year. And now we have to make up that, because unless we do it again, it's not, it's an added increase to make up for the fact that we used other funds for it. So we have a natural increase this year over what we actually did last year. But, but we actually we don't have a spending increase. We just have we have money spent because we gave ourselves a tax cut essentially out of reserves last year to replace that. Now, if we were going to do the same thing, we have to do double that this year. in order to, do that, which is something that just winds up, it makes this fluctuation even worse. And it's making, we're sitting here explaining, well, we have a 4% increase now over last year. But we used money to lower it last year that we had out of savings. And so, if we did that again, an equal amount to do that, that would just cover what we actually replaced. We'd actually have to do double that in order to
What
do
did we
that.
use the money for last year?
We didn't.
We didn't, we took
So we didn't.
we did a re, we
did.
we did.
$179,000.
There is no-
79,000.
We moved it from the general fund. In the budget, we moved it from the general fund to the capital improvement fund. There's a line item in our memo, the final memo that Tessa wrote. There's a line item on the general fund says use of fund balance reserves for operations. It's zero. There's nothing. I don't understand why we keep saying that we use fund balance to fund operating expenses. We did not.
What you did when you did that is you transferred, like what I was talking about.
Transfer.
You budgeted for city hall repairs that you didn't do. So you moved that over because you had that budgeted under city hall. You moved that over to the capital fund. You have those budgeted this year. We didn't increase the levy for that in the capital fund. The comp plan dollars were budgeted and we moved those over. And so now we have the comp plan in there in the capital fund and you're not budgeting extra dollars. Well, you're using some of that money that you only budgeted like 20,000. There was also, I think, $17,000 that was budgeted for codification, which we know we have to do codification, but we don't know how much it would be. We know it's going to be more than $17,000. So those were the things that were moved over to your appendix A. And that's what some of the fund balances in here for some of those items that are here that you didn't have to budget for, but you are putting them in your budget. Like you have the city hall air conditioner, you have the city hall parking lot, there's a number of them in here that you moved the money over and you didn't increase the levy for those. You're putting them in here because that money was moved over because it wasn't spent. And that's what we were talking about doing, is that's where you would move that over. That's why I said, usually I had my council do that in the actuals where they transferred it over and they didn't put it in the budget to transfer it over. That was really your end of year 2023 extra that you moved over, but you budgeted it in 2025. And so I would come back and normally tell you that we should do a transfer at the end of the year. So it's in your actuals and it's not in your budget the next year. If you didn't have a finance director and you had consultants and you had a number, you had 2 city administrators, so you didn't have any continuity. And so some of these things weren't found in time to work it into that.
Right.
So in some respects, you're still in a little bit of flux on getting your things in order on how you want them to work.
So where do we go on this snowball then?
Well, let's take a vote because I think we've talked it to death. I propose that we lower the expense by 20 grand and we lower the levy by 20 grand. We keep the 40 grand that we already lowered the levy.
So you're talking about actually adjusting it fully. Is that right?
We already have a 40,000.
Or tell me I'm wrong.
I'm saying that if she's gonna lower the expense by 20 grand, we can lower the levy by an additional 20 grand. That's what I'm saying. The 40, keep it as a reduction already. That's already in
So now
the.
you're talking about a $60,000 use of fund.
Correct.
So
I am-
it's 40.
No, it's not a $60,000 use of fund balance because it's for next year's expenses. We think it's not gonna be 120, it's gonna be 100.
Yes.
So we're gonna budget 20 grand less. So I don't have to levy for that 20 grand.
But that was the point of the 40,000 was to.
Nope, the point of the 40,000 was to use some of the money that we over budgeted plowing in this year.
Yeah, so there's, right,
So I'm just,
there was 80,000, we were 80,000 in. We lowered the levy by 40, half of that. We left ourselves essentially after our last meeting, 20,000 over what we thought it might be, but we wanted to get more of the average, which we got. We got a 10-year thing. We have an average at 100, yet we're now currently budgeted at 120. Is that, am I right so far?
Correct.
Okay, so if we now take this out, we've already taken the 40,000 out of the levy. We're actually, if we're gonna drop this, we're actually talking about dropping our. As I see this, we're talking about, we're not talking about money because we're talking about future spent budgeted money. So we're saying, let's lower the budget by 20,000 to 100. So that all we're doing is taking that 20. We can't count it as money we're saving, we're just taking it out of the budget. Is that correct? So far, am I right on
But if
that?
you take 20 out of expenses, you would take 20 out.
The 20 will come out at the end. Because it's in this, it's gonna come out, it's gonna drop to another 20 or the whole thing would drop another 20. Because the expenses are coming off.
no, we're gonna,
Or where am I wrong?
if you reduce the 20 grand in expense, your fund balance is gonna grow by 20 grand because you're levying for that 20 grand that you don't need.
I'm saying we dropped the levy as well. Correct?
That's what you're saying, okay,
Okay.
that's what you're saying, you didn't say that's.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm saying because basically we take it out of our budget, then that should lower the whole thing at the end.
So what you want to do is you want to use $60,000 in fund balance.
I wouldn't frame it like that, I would frame it
No,
as
I
lower
wouldn't.
expense 20 and lower levy 20.
Right, but when the budget is done and it shows, it's gonna say you're using 60,000 in fund balance because it's going to come out to be 60,000 more, you're using 60,000 more in expenses than you are in revenue, and that's how it looks.
Still could be.
No,
40,
because
could be
we're
40.
reducing the expense by.
Correct.
Right, but you're already using 40,000, you reduced the,
Revenue.
Our costs.
but he's just saying reduce.
When we
but-
reduced that revenue by 40 the last time, we still had the expense at 120.
Right.
Right, so if
Right.
I reduce, yes,
Now, so if we don't change the revenue,
but he
change the
just said
expense.
change revenue.
Change the levy by 20 and change the expense by 20, the net is zero.
Then it's that 20 is a net zero. The rest of it is the previous math that we're.
Oh,
doing.
yeah, you're
Right?
right, right,
Okay,
you're correct.
so we're all on the same page.
Yes,
right?
yes,
Okay.
you mean change both
Yes.
20, yes, so
yes.
it's zero net effect, you're right.
Is everybody happy with that?
yeah,
Does that make sense or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Steve, when's the Prior Lake Fire Department need to know that decision?
They told me by spring, early,
Okay, and there'd be a vote,
yeah,
or the council would have a vote.
yeah.
all right, anything else? I think that was the only,
Those are the only two items that
Right,
had left.
and Steve, when do you think they're gonna have an answer on the state aid? That our portion of it, how much we can expect our contracted costs to go down next year? Will that be before the budget's finalized?
I don't know exactly when the dissolution meeting is. I'll find out from Administrator Waddell.
Okay.
For sure, but I'm hoping it should be before our TNT meeting.
Okay, so we still have a chance if we want to,
I would think so.
okay.
He said the next couple of weeks and our TNT meeting's the 15th, so I would think before then.
It's my understanding that you guys don't want to do it now because you don't know what the number is, but if he gets the number by the time we have to decide. That's another thing where we can lower our public safety levy by that amount and also lower the expense by that amount, so it's net zero on the fund balance.
I'd be fine with that. I just don't wanna do it ahead of time. I really don't.
Yeah, I would be hesitant
Yeah.
before we get the number.
Okay. I mean, it's 83 grand is what our 18% was, and we're cutting that in half, although they come up with other expenses, I guess.
Well, yeah, because I think they're replacing it with para and other
ESSD,
ESSD
and
and.
they have to
yeah.
put those benefits in because they're changing them
okay.
over.
I have two questions. That I'm not asking you to change anything. I just have two questions on the capital improvement plan. Or capital and FX 401. And it's in the it's in Appendix A.
Okay.
Under public works street improvements. And I forgot to ask this a couple, I don't know what page, it's highlighted.
Two.
It's $1 million in budget 2028. What's that $1 million?
That was in your previous budget, so I'm assuming that they're thinking of transferring in money from some fund, but I don't know what it was.
It's in our
It
previous.
says transfer in next to it.
It
Am I
looks
looking
like
at it
it's
right?
probably from Country Court Lift Station.
No, there's another one up above, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the revenue, and then there's an
Okay, I
expense.
gotcha.
But I don't know if that was out of a utility fund or if it was some state money, I'm not sure. Being it was in 2028, I don't know where that was from because I didn't put together that capital fund.
Right, so we'll straighten that out over the next.
Oh,
Before-
when we had the CIP, yeah.
Second question I have, same area, or same section. Why are we assuming worst case here with the Stone Bridge in 2028? And where does the 2730 come from? I thought it was. That number doesn't jive with what Shane presented last time. It was either 877 or.
Well, let's see, if memory serves me, weren't those numbers already old numbers
Yes,
to start with?
yes.
But-
And when we were going to dig into this more next year,
So
Right.
don't worry about these numbers.
no.
Okay.
Right.
Just want to make sure we're not.
These were kind of placeholders from
Yeah,
what was in there
They
for
were,
out
they were,
years.
plus these were estimates from what, now 2 years, it's close
Yeah.
to 2 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
so, that would be probably why it would be, I think if I recall, we were at kind of the worst case of scenario on the wider range of that, because for one, they're probably not going down.
Right. There was a couple of them you guys had me put inflation factors on too, but I don't remember which ones they were right
All
now.
right,
Yep.
so we haven't decided, we just put that in there.
This
It just
is
makes the fund
their
balance look really
placeholder.
horrible.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Thank you.
All right, so we good?
Can I ask a budgetary question? So proposed tax came off of Scott's money today. Or I got mine today, and it's very good time to let people. I think there's gonna be some really upset people, but anyways. I had about a 10% increase on the market value. In 2008, that went the opposite way. So what do cities do in a 2008 scenario? Because now we're saying all of our increase is happening because of the market value falling index, right? But when we have a decrease, what do cities do with that?
When you have a decrease,
Yeah.
it gets shifted around. When you have 2028 was a good example. I mean, 2008.
Sorry.
I lived through 2008. In Minnesota, we're not a mill rate. So in a mill rate, no matter what your value is, it would be like what your tax rate is. And as you got more taxable value, it would, just multiply that and it would go up or down based on what it is. In Minnesota, we're a levy. So we set a levy amount. We don't get any more and we don't get any less unless we change our levy. But what it does is it takes all the different types of property, your ag, your commercial, your industrial, and your residential, and it shifts people around in the pie. So what happened in 2008 when it went really bad is that a lot of commercial industrial property values dropped. And so residential started bearing more of the tax base. And until things got good again and that commercial industrial was coming back and businesses were doing good, then it shifted it back to the commercial industrial properties, and then the residential, took less of it. It shifts it around between the values. So you have ag, you don't have any commercial industrial to do. So Credit Rivers, yeah, and you've got some ag. So pretty much it's gonna be between residential, because you don't have a lot of commercial industrial to take on any of that. You don't have any commercial industrial growth, because if you had that, that would take on a lot of it. And it would ease the burden on residential, but you don't have that here. But it will, they have to do, is it 1/3 or 1/4 a year, they go back and actually physically assess. Otherwise, there's a state law that tells them you've done this with your Board of Appeals with your values. It all depends upon what's happening, in what sector and what type of property that you have. If you have like commercial, or if you have like apartments or single family homes, that type of thing. It shifts it between classes of property.
Is there an easy way to determine how much of our valuation, taxable value is due to development versus increase?
New properties rather than.
Yeah.
Existing.
Yeah, that's what I've been working on, my long range plan, but you actually
Thank you.
You actually had that done in 2023. I put together a whole valuation, and as I was going through looking for things, I happened to find where you had Ellers do it on the same file that I was using. So yeah, when I put that together and we bring the long range plan and we talk about that in spring, I tried to figure out I was trying to estimate what you think your new
Okay.
value will be, because you want development to pay for itself. And so what you want to do is you want to be able to capture, which is why you try to keep your tax rate level or just increase slightly, because that way the extra money that you're getting, you want to put into reserves instead of lowering your tax rate, because then when things come up like public works, or all of a sudden you have to buy a new truck because you have more miles of road, and your contractor, I don't know how many miles of road you can have before he's not going to be able to handle it, or he's not going to want to, with a lot of cul-de-sacs and things, that then you have that money built up so that you can do things like that.
Okay, does that take into account the loss of ag tax then? Most of it will be a loss.
Ag is a lot lower. They get a break. So it's any residential is going to increase it.
But I mean, it's not a true 100% development, right? So it's gotta be the development increase minus the. I think
Yeah.
that's-
Most of it's gonna be yeah.
Okay, I would love to make sure we do that for our buildings. So.
Well, I was using the same model. I just had to, I was looking for information and I happened to fall upon it and I go, oh, this is the same file I use. But I was using one from Ellers from 15 years ago, so it's the same file. I just found more updated data that you guys had done it in 2023.
Can we just make that a part of our budget document?
It is.
next year?
For next year, yes.
Yeah.
I had planned on doing that this year, but I was missing pieces and trying to go back,
Oh.
but I already have it pretty well developed, and now that I found that one, a lot of the holes I was missing are filled in.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With that, probably a good time to adjourn, so we can take a little pause before we start our council meeting. Thank you, Abe. Thank you, Leroy. Motion and second to adjourn our budget workshop. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We'll start our council meeting in 6 minutes at 6 o'clock.
I got info for
It is
Yeah.
realized.
On the lake or?